Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Works Podcast. I am your host, Samuel Ashkenazi. We've got a big one for you today. Coming up later in the program, I'll be speaking to Lukas Ventouras, a Democratic congressional candidate for New York District 1. But first, I don't have a lot to get to today. Tonight is the third stop on the Protest Start It's All Red New York tour. If you're in Nyack, please come see me live. I have support from Tom McGrath, Midnight Shinobi, Storm the Valley, and Rivet. It's going to be a really good show. I've been having such a blast performing for everybody and sharing my album with all these new faces and fans. It's been a blast. Tickets are available at the link in the description here or at the door at Club Andromeda. Join the movement. You come stand up to that big mouth in the White House. And if you can't make it tonight, be sure to stream Stories from the End, available on all streaming platforms. Next up, Lee Cronin's The Mummy, rated R. This is 2 hours and 13 minutes. This is from New Line Cinema, Atomic Monster, and Blumhouse. Yikes. This is a horror film, written and directed by Lee Cronin. This stars Jack Reynor, Leah Costa, and May Kalawami. Lee Cronin's The Mummy is a derivative but original new horror film hitting theaters this weekend, and we have to talk about it. But first, if you like this video and you want to see more, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to keep this mummy buried, subscribe to my Patreon page where you get early access to all of these reviews before they hit YouTube. Lee Cronin's The Mummy has nothing to do with the Brendan Fraser-led franchise from the early 2000s, nor does it have anything to do with The Mummy from 2017 starring Tom Cruise. This is a new movie written and directed by Lee Cronin, most known for Evil Dead Rise back in 2023. Charlie Cannon, Jack Reynor, is an international reporter on assignment in Cairo, Egypt. His wife, Larissa, Leah Costa, and his two children, Katie and Sebastian, Natalie Grace and Shiloh Molina, are with him in Egypt, going to school and enjoying their temporary home. That is until Katie disappears from their garden one afternoon during a haboob. Charlie chases after the kidnapper, but loses her in the sandstorm. Well, 8 years later, Katie's disappearance has altered the trajectory of all their lives, and things were never the same again. Sebastian now has a younger sister, Maud, played by Billy Roy. Dad never accepted the promotion he was offered and ended up a soundboard operator in Arizona. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, a plane crashes and among the wreckage is a sarcophagus, at least 3,000 years old, which contains their daughter. The Egyptian authorities call the Cannons to inform them that Katie has been found, but she is different. I had every intention of getting on here today and tell you how much I hated this movie. And the truth is, I actually kind of liked it. The Mummy doesn't reinvent the sarcophagus, and in fact steals quite a few plot devices from other fantastical horror stories, but it is undoubtedly fun and fresh. Although The Mummy is wrapped in all the aesthetic of a mummy monster movie, what we really have here is a classic possession film, just told with a different culture's demons. The desert settings and the unique approach to the history of the monster feels fresh, even if I don't really believe the lore to be even remotely accurate to any Egyptian religions. I also really enjoyed the screenplay, particularly the character of Detective Dahlia Zaki, May Kalamawi. The cops in this movie, or at least this cop, isn't an idiot. There are so many horror movies where the police are just totally incompetent and completely unrealistic and stupid, like the police in last week's Faces of Death. Here, Detective Zaki is all over this case and actually shoots people when they need to be shot and doesn't miss. Amazing. The Mummy is a very entertaining film also. When I looked up the runtime and I saw 2 hours and 13 minutes, I was honestly shocked. It did not feel that long at all. If I were to nitpick a bit, there are some really big plot holes, particularly in the second half, where some things just really stop adding up. The demon mummy monster girl has this increasing array of powers, and after a certain point, I was thinking, well, if she could open doors with her mind, why isn't she undoing the hand restraints? I digress. Jack Reynor as Charlie also has a couple scenes that don't feel as strong as they could have been. To their credit, though, the kids are great in this film. All of the kids give stellar performances. Leah Costa is also really good as Larissa, the mom, but the character is left pretty underdeveloped. They could have done more with that. All in all, The Mummy was actually a pretty good. It isn't going to be a favorite, but it has a ton of really goopy, squishy, gnarly effects that made me squirm in all the best ways, and it kept me really entertained. far from perfect, but a huge surprise from a studio like Blumhouse, which hasn't come out with anything this good in nearly a decade, I'd think. So, if you're looking for something to watch this weekend, I would give The Mummy a shot. It's fun. 3.5 stars out of 5. On the works today, I have a very special guest. He is running for New York's first congressional district, endorsed by Blue America and the Center for Free Thought and Equality PAC. I'm so excited to learn more about him. Please welcome Mr. Lukas Ventouras. How are you?
How you doing? I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
There's so much to talk about. Oh my gosh. I mean, here's my thing, right? So like over the last couple years, I've radically shifted what my career pursuits have been in response largely to everything going on politically
hmm
in the country. And while I was doing research on you, I noticed that you write in your bio that politics really wasn't your first choice as a career to go into. Can you just talk to me and go through the process of how did you end up running for Congress, and what drove you to this decision?
Well, yeah, so it was never, honestly, if you had told me, and I say this to people, if you told me I guess 6 years ago now that it's 2026, if you told me that you, Lucas Ventouras, would be running for Congress in 6 years, I would have laughed you out of the room. Actually, we probably would have put money on it, even though I'm not a betting. I would have been like, no, there's no way I'm doing that. All politicians are slimy and self-serving and et cetera, et cetera. And I still think that to a large extent.
Huh.
Um, rather than that idea driving me towards nihilism, it sort of drove me more towards, well, if I think everything sucks and politicians, even the good ones, are not able to do what they set out to do, what can I do? And that
Mm,
kind of brought me into the political world, whether that be working in journalism, civil rights law, politics, as in campaigns or in offices themselves. And so I did that. I figured, I'm a first generation American. All my grandpa ever would tell me about as a kid is seeing the Statue of Liberty as he sailed into Ellis Island and how he thought that being an American was the highest honor, right? And of course, I recognize that there are so many injustices that are baked into the cake of this country, but that for the most part, we or people like me have always sort of tried to make strides towards progress. And in a moment that feels like we're sliding back, that's sort of why I got involved on campaigns. But again, being a politician was never something I wanted to do. I think honestly, until January 6th,
mm.
and the whole stop and steal nonsense, where I just felt at the time while it was happening, the Democratic response was really poor. But I think if you look at Merrick Garland's, I wouldn't say refusal. I can't speak for why he did what he did, but the fact that it took him so long to hold people to account, it ended up creating a monster for us. And I just kind of felt after working on some of these campaigns that, we weren't resonating with people, young people and self-described minority groups were drifting from the party, feeling that we were out of touch. And I figured, listen, I do my homework. I know the issues. I'm passionate about helping people. Why can't I be a leader in that sense? And yeah, here I am.
I think a lot of Democrats have kind of faced this issue since 2016 when the party establishment rejected Bernie Sanders and backed Hillary Clinton. I think it's this issue of not just being against Trump, but being for something.
hmm
Can you,
Yes.
I guess, go into what is your vision for New York District 1? But also, the country as a whole, on a national scale when and if you do take the seat.
Well, I like the way you preface that question because I think a lot of times we've seen the Democratic establishment class basically say, once we get normal Republicans back, this country is great. And I think, you know, I've never been a Republican. I have nothing against Republican voters. So when I say Republican, I mean the politicians, the operatives, the billionaires, right? And I grew up on Long Island, so Long Island is one of the few places in this country still where things are 50-50 for the most part, and at least politically district wise. And for me, I felt that when Schumer said, for instance, that for every what was it moderate Democrat that we lose, we'll pick up or sorry, for every blue collar Democrat that we lose, we'll pick up a moderate Republican in the suburbs. And A, that calculation hasn't played out in a victorious formula, and B, it creates, when you talk about locally, it creates a permission structure, I think, for, people in my life who I know who don't like Trump. And it's not just because he's crass, et cetera. They think he's an idiot. They think he doesn't know what he's talking about, and they think he's, far right, but who may still have conservative sensibilities themselves. And they'll say, well, this lower guy is the Main Street, moderate, so he'll be a check on power. And that is partially the fault of Democrats for trying to compartmentalize MAGA and Republicans when they are the same thing. And so I kind of
Mm.
just wanted to hit that earlier part of your question. But in terms of what I want for this district is I want this district politically to be not treated as both flyover country, but also just a rich enclave because both we are treated as both simultaneously, right? We have the Hamptons, et cetera, and we have the North Shore, which has a lot of money. And I
Hmm.
think the outside spectator looks at it and says, well, this is just like a rich MAGA district. And a lot of Democrats in the establishment in DC and in Albany, they don't see the worth in investing in this district. And what I really want to see out of this district is a candidate, hopefully myself, and a legislator, hopefully, that can actually bring people out. Someone who can inspire people to stop being so just apoplectic almost about the
Mm.
political process, just so finished. I was having this conversation with my mom, who at one point was big into politics, in the Democratic Party, and she over 40 years has been so let down by the political process that, she's one of those people that, you feel like they need to be brought back into the fold. And so what I want to see in this district is honestly, I want to see universal health care for the people that live in this district. I want to see more houses being built. I want to see us, erect seawalls to protect the island from rising sea levels. And there's so much I want to see out of this country, this district. I look at them as one and the same at times because I feel like Suffolk is such a microcosm of this country at times. And, I just want to see a
Agreed on that.
government. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I'm running, by the way, because I felt that that wasn't almost noticed amongst a lot of the operatives out here, which is weird because we're from here.
Like I remember I was going to school. I went to school in Comac,
Okay.
and I remember vividly thinking in 2016, as I was leaving high school, that I was like, this town is the perfect microcosm of everything going on in the country. I mean, that year alone, we had a rape scandal in our school that
Yep.
had made the news. We had had a Nazi scandal make the news that year from seniors in our school that were wearing,
Yeah.
swastikas on their t-shirts
I
at a
remember
party.
that. Yeah, I
Right, you
remember
remember that,
that.
and like I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like the all of these tiny little stories are personified nationally across the entire country.
Yeah.
The entire country is dealing with these tiny little anecdotal stories, and I felt that Suffolk and particularly my town was really at the heart of that. Was really like experiencing all of those issues all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's you're like to your point, that's very overlooked in this area. They kind of treat Suffolk like it's a big monolith, and I mean
Yeah.
politically, for years I don't want to say it has been, but it certainly leaned more red.
It lends
um
credence to their calculations, the
yeah.
more red that our results are.
I wanted to pick up on something that you also said too about how your
Sure.
your mom has kind of become this disaffected voter. As we look right now, I mean, the Democrats across the country are doing well in their elections, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this really feels like they're doing well just because the other guy is so terrible.
Yep. Yeah.
And the Democrats haven't really articulated an actual plan of attack here, um, that I feel really represents where the base is. And I think polling also kind of corroborates that. You see
Sure.
that Democratic establishment leaders, their polling is, I think, the lowest it's ever been.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What is your response to that in a sense? Like, what do you think Democrats should or could be doing right now?
I'll spice that with I had a conversation with a big, I won't say their name just 'cause I doubt they want this put out there, but a big American podcaster on the like more left, millions of YouTube subscribers, and we kind of just we bumped into, we had a conversation, and um, they were saying that they and the people in their cohort, I guess in that media sphere, really felt like this was the Democratic Tea Party moment, and I didn't, and I don't. And I don't
Mm.
mean to be the Debbie Downer of the era, but I feel like the difference between the Tea Party, it was partially because it was astroturfed by billionaires who wanted um, something out of very angry Republican constituents. So that's the one thing, is that I don't think it's apt, because I think the Tea Party itself was a completely fraudulent movement. But again, that's a conversation for a different time. If you want to take the idea of a movement itself, we don't have one. We don't have a cohesive message. We're not all
Mm.
saying the same thing. And now you could say, well, that's the difference between the uprising left, or even just Democrats who are more populist, and those who are entrenched, which is true. But even amongst us, right? I'm one of many young people running. Some people's main focus is ICE. Some people's main focus is the Middle East. Personally, my main focus is affordability and corruption, but we're not all saying the same thing. So it's not like as if you put on a Lucas video and you put on a, you know, Mr. Guy who's running in Colorado. We probably wouldn't even sound the same. We'd maybe be hitting on similar points. Our anger would be the same, but you know, a lot of us have never talked to each other. We've never met each other. We aren't planning how to go at this together. I know very few other candidates. The candidates I do know who are more aligned with me on structure are living across the country, and so it's not something I could do in the here and now, right? And that's the biggest problem, is not a Tea Party movement. If there's still time to create one. We have the resources and the apparatus to do so, but I think that also would require people like me being more accepted into the fold of establishment politics, which just won't happen. And I'm being very frank. I've been able to build a campaign that is capable of winning, but that has been entirely with the help of myself and of volunteers and people who work for me and believe in the message. I haven't gotten any help from any established people, which is fine. I think it probably works better in my favor. But to that point, there isn't a national movement. There is a national movement of, wow, these Republicans suck. They're covering up sex crimes and the tariffs and the war abroad and everything they're doing to gut our healthcare. That is bad, but it's kind of like Biden winning in 2020. It was a default win. He wasn't inspiring anyone. And, had we had an
100%.
inspiring figure in 2020, you know, everything matters, right? The downstream effects of the top of the ticket matters. So had we put someone who was exciting more young people in 2020, we would have had more representatives that maybe would have been more like me, more senators that maybe would have had the same sensibilities as someone in the vein of what I'm talking about. And, we just need we just need to see and have people rise up and create a national movement. But again, it's not done overnight, and B, it's not done with a lot of money, and sometimes those things are counterproductive.
So, two questions for you, I
Sure.
guess, or two in one, really. But I mean, when you look at the issues that you're most concerned about or focused on, where do you see yourself falling on the political spectrum as far as, how left are you or versus moderate? And then going to that second point of why do you think establishment Democrats have been so hesitant to embrace the more left factions of their base and actually been more willing to reach out to the Republicans and MAGA base who, I mean, frankly, I don't believe are movable. I don't believe a huge portion of them are ever going to vote Democrat, even if if Democrats walked over to them and gave them $1 million.
Right. So just the first part of that again, just so I have it all, was what?
Was where do you fall politically? Like,
Okay. Yes.
how left
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
moderate?
I, I'm pretty trying to be careful when I answer this question, not because I'm calculating what I'm going to say, but just because I don't feel like I fall neatly.
Mm.
I'm definitely not. like a center right Democrat. That I can pretty openly trash. But I'm not, people would probably call me progressive, I think, if we're being honest. And I have progressive sensibilities in the sense that I want this country to progress. But I don't think labels are very helpful. I think there can be a bit of nuance to my position sometimes that maybe wouldn't be considered as such. I kind of consider myself an FDR Democrat, New Deal Democrat. I think that the only really important thing about how I brand myself should be the fact that I'm branding myself as 100% behind labor, and everything is downstream of that, whether that be healthcare policy, childcare policy, you name it. It is really all downstream of labor. So for me, I'm a pro-labor Democrat. If that makes me a progressive, then I'm a progressive, but I don't really go around labeling myself. And I think to the second part of your question, the hesitancy isn't, I think for some of them on certain issues, and whether we get to that or not is a different question. For some of them, it is ideological. But I think for a lot of them, they probably started like us in that they had more purity to their positions, but government is such a swamp that I think a lot of them eventually they either do the right thing and they don't take the money and they just get chewed up and spit out and they realize that I can't be effective, or they start taking the money because they want to win. And the latter is really the biggest part for me, is that it is much easier for a senator to say, let's go chase after Republicans, because at the end of the day, that's actually hurting their ability to fundraise less than if they were saying, let's go, full metal Medicare for all. Then
Mm.
a single Democrat, not a single Democrat would get money from the health insurance lobby, which is an overwhelming majority of Democrats. You know what I mean? And I think part of how we win is being honest. And so I'm not one to mince words. If there's a Democrat taking money from APAC or the insurance lobby or you name it, I'm very honest about the fact that I don't support that. I don't agree with that. Um, Money is the biggest impediment to progress and change in terms of being like, what is one singular thing I could point to? It all falls under the umbrella of that. And so that's really why, Democrats, a lot of them are addicted to corporate cash.
Mm.
We've seen this in our own congressional seat in the past, and it's unfortunate because a lot of them they might think a certain way, but they don't have the, for lack of a better term, like the set on them to like actually fight and say, you know what, I'm going to do the difficult thing and not take money from, from this lobby because it's just not the right thing to do. And I don't think they realize, or maybe they realize, but they don't care that a collective caucus that is all, it's like how the NRA is no longer, the NRA used to be a bipartisan, uh, they used to give on a bipartisan basis until Democrats said, we're drawing the line here. And now the NRA is seen as a like conservative billionaire thing that like Republicans who don't care about school shootings support. And we have the possibility to do that when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to war, when it comes to anything. But it's about electing people who will actually do those things. And that's why primaries are important.
I wanted to ask you a quick question about our congressional neighbor, Mr. Tom Suozzi, right before I jump into some of your policies.
Sure.
Tom Suozzi has been somebody that has, going back to like Democrats that have really, kind of disappointed the base here. For me, I canvassed for Tom Suozzi. I
Yeah,
was, I really wanted to get him elected because he's certainly better than any Republican could be in office.
sure.
But at the same time, Swazi has been really outspoken, saying that Zoran Mamdani is not even recognized as a Democrat in his party. He says things like, I mean, he censured Al Green
Yeah, I remember that.
for interrupting the president during his State of the Union, but doesn't censure people like Randy Fine
Right,
or Andy Ogle sitting there saying that Muslim people are like dogs.
right.
I mean, what is your, going to your phrasing before, I mean, do you view that as ideological or do you view that as beholden to other interests?
I think. I actually think, and whether this gets me in trouble or not, I don't really care because, I'm here for the people of CD1 and that's it.
Make it spicy.
Um,
Let's go.
no, I just, I'm glad you brought him up as an example because I think the Nassau Democrats are a really good example of that being ideological.
Okay.
I think that, listen, you want to disagree with Mamdani, it's fine. This is freedom of speech, freedom of organization. You know, you're part of a political party. No one's ever going to agree 100%. Do I agree with Mamdani on 100% of things? No. Um, but I agree with him on more things than I do with Tom Suozzi, probably. And that's not because it's ideological. That's because Mamdani has a very forward-thinking approach to politics. I see a problem, I try and fix it. All that other stuff about him being Muslim and that is all propaganda, in my opinion. He seems like a stand-up guy, and that's all I really care about. I've seen him do things as mayor that I have not seen a single other mayor do in 25 years in the last 3 to 4 months.
In a really
And
short amount of time.
so, the idea that we are poo-pooing a rising star in the party who has given us a proven formula to win in urban areas, to me feels ideological because, you never saw Hochul come out and castigate him in that way. For her, she probably does agree with him on certain things, but she is of a more corporate captured Democrat, obviously, than Mamdani.
Yes.
But you see the difference between like a Gillibrand, some of the things she said about him, that he's like a jihadist. That
One
is
of the
ideological.
most,
It has to
yeah,
be. Yeah, it has to be ideological. And you know, I've
I
met
have to tell you,
Swazi. Yeah.
I couldn't believe when Gillibrand said that.
Oh,
I
I was
was,
like, I sent it to my team at the time, and I was like, is this the Onion or something? Like, I was confused,
yeah,
and they're like, no, it's real. Just thought, especially being from New York, this is the great American melting pot. This is also for the longest time. Obviously, you had the port of entry out west as well. For the longest time, New York it was the eye into the rest of the country and our eye to the rest of the world. And so to be the New York senator and to so brazenly attack someone basically because of their faith and because they don't agree with you on funding a genocide, then it's so for people like that, I do think it's ideological. I've met him on a number of occasions. I think he's a nice guy, Swazi, but that's kind of the problem with the two-party system is that there are Democrats who do things a lot of the times that I really disagree with, who I would still probably consider Democrats, but there are some Democrats sometimes where I'm like, if 80% of your votes are with, Republicans, you're probably not a Democrat. But the fact of the matter is that district is weird. And he's very popular there. And, I do think that sometimes, does he speak for everyone in that district? No. But the fact of the matter is he's probably speaking for a majority of the people who are going to come out regardless. And if
yeah.
people like you and I are disgruntled and couch bound, then he kind of is exercising the will of the constituents who come out and vote for him. And I think that is often not recognized by, maybe not by you and I, but people in our cohort who are disappointed and want to see change and then don't come out for primaries, don't come out to protest, don't make their voices heard, don't try and educate themselves on the ins and outs of what's going on. And this isn't just our generation. This is just people who want to see change but don't always take that final step. And I don't want to seem like I'm lecturing at people because not everyone has the luxury to be politically engaged. So it is sometimes a catch-22. But, I do think it's ideological for him. And I do think he's exercising the will of the people who are empowering him, if that makes sense.
So I did want to go to some of your policies.
Yeah.
Your website is great. You have a bunch of different things that you have listed on there. I
Thank you.
encourage any of our listeners to go check it out. I will be linking it in the show description here. So one of the things that you're super invested in is empowering Long Island workers. Um,
Yes.
one of the things that you bring up on your website is the PRO Act and Card Check. Can you go into what these policies are?
You know, I also have board level representation on there. And I think all three things are very important because, especially the PRO Act is the ability and for workers to organize and take their fates into their own hands, right? That's kind of what I see is the benefit of board level representation as well. All of these things, what they're doing is actually putting the power back in the hands of the everyday worker. And we often hear about, oh, the corrupt union bosses, blah blah blah. Part of why you have issues with unions is because unions are not empowered. So they are, you are able to have a single force consolidate, because they're in the pocket of a politician or a politician's in their pocket and vice versa. What these would do is give power to the individual in a workspace. It would also give the power for people who are not in unionized settings to unionize. It would stop places like Starbucks from prohibiting their, I'm not sure if they call them units or whatever it is, to organize. And, card check as well, being able to be a proud union member, not hiding it, and being able to wield a sense of democratic power within your small cohort is important because, union victories have been overall working class victories over the course of history in this country, whether that be the workday, um, conditions for workers, healthcare for workers. These are all things that either unions have provided to the broader American worker, even those of whom are not unionized, but also things that we can potentially improve upon. And, I'm often told that unions don't like universal healthcare. I'm like, well, let me talk to actual union um, people, not just the reps. I want to talk to people that are actually in the unions, the people who day to day with, four kids, them and their wife or their husband, you name it, sometimes working multiple jobs. I think that they might have a different opinion than you. And so yeah, I mean, just empowering the worker is, I've never been in a union and I don't come from a union family. My grandparents, when they came to this country, they owned small businesses, and my mom is a therapist, so I guess that's technically a small business as well. And but it doesn't matter, right? It's just the idea that the worker should not be trampled upon, and workers' rights are human rights, I guess, to me.
And I feel like that's a sentiment that should be pretty universal. And I even feel that that's pretty universal among Republicans too.
Yeah,
I sit here and I very frequently try to talk to the other side. I like talking to the other side. Not that I ever get anywhere with them, but I mean, like, I do like talking to people and seeing where they fall on the issues. And generally speaking, everybody seems to be falling on the same side of the issue. It's just the way the
right.
media and politicians spin it to make us think that we're so much more divided on this.
Yeah,
So, I mean, it also kind of reminds me of this stunt that the White House just pulled with the DoorDash driver, coming there. She's sitting there, the DoorDash grandma, I believe she's called, and, you know, he's bringing her there to advertise no tax on tips, which is a policy that's going to end, by the way. That's a temporary policy.
right.
But but she's sitting there doing DoorDash for her husband that's also like dying of cancer or something like that, and like the entire reason she has to be working this job right now is because she doesn't have universal health care.
Exactly. And a company like DoorDash, I'm from New York, you're from New York. This is big. Like the cabbies in New York, right? The fact that they have essentially lobbied to not have to pay them a living wage or provide them health care. So that is immediately what kind of just like dinged off for me. Also, as an aside, she's the same lady that they used for a stunt last year. So I doubt that her story is even real. If it is, I'm sorry. Um, but to your point, it is indicative of a broken system. And
I
I
think it's
just
also funny because, he tried to make this stunt to highlight one of his his only policy that I could think of that's benefiting people. And and yet, like I think all it did was actually serve to highlight all of the issues in the system.
yes, it was stark. I mean, it was again, if you take it at face value and you say this is a real grandmother and this is a real situation, because as a candidate, these are real situations that we encounter. You know,
Hmm.
I spoke to someone last month who essentially was bled dry paying for her husband's treatment, and he passed away, and she is basically living around the poverty line now, having sank her savings into trying to prolong her husband's life, which is, what any of us would do for our loved one. And it's just stark because any rational person wouldn't look at that and say, well, good on her for picking up three jobs. Yeah, you can marvel at the work ethic, but there's a reason behind the work ethic, and that's survival. And no one should ever,
Yeah.
you know, it just doesn't make sense to me. And to your point about Republicans, like I had a friend, he sent me like he's conservative, as like a lot of my friends from my hometown are, and he sent me like the Democrats tweet. It said like tax the rich, and he was like, this is just a slogan. And I'm like, okay, but like, what does it mean to you? And he was like, yeah. He's like, well, we should have better tax policy pertaining to like tax loopholes. I'm like, that's all they're saying. But you're not radicalized, but you're taught to just not like the slogan. And sometimes baseline slogans are bad, But in that case, saying tax the rich, there's nothing wrong with that. What you're saying is, especially in an era where we are not nuanced with our policy prescriptions, um, one-liners sometimes carry a lot of weight because you understand what that means. What that means is not literally tax every single person that makes over $100,000 a year. It means close loopholes and make sure that Jeff Bezos isn't paying the effective tax rate of me and you. That's all that means. Um,
Yeah.
but but sometimes we've been sort of corralled into, if you're blue and you say something, it's not as good as if you're red and you say something, even if you're saying the same thing. And, trying to see what we can do about that out here.
I think it's even uh, to me the problem almost seems a little bit more daunting than that, in the sense that,
Oh
to
yeah.
me it seems that like there are huge swaths of the country that have been watching Fox News for 20 or 30 years, and they have just been completely, I hate using the word brainwashed, but I mean, convinced that Democrats are evil.
Yes.
They
Yes.
call us democrats. They sit there and call us libtards. I mean, they seemingly vote just to piss the other side off.
It can feel that way. And, some of those are the TFGs, right? The too far gones. And I think you have to no, that's big. I think that's, because I'm glad you said that, because I think there's a naivete in some establishment groups where they're like, we'll win the Trumpers over one day. I'm like, you won't.
No,
You won't.
you're not.
You
Yeah,
simply
no.
won't. And but the only counter to that is I'll say, obviously I'm pretty obviously putting it out there that I would never vote for a Republican. I don't believe in their policies, but I think many of us would probably fall victim to, when a Republican says things that we agree with, automatically discounting it. Now you should, because most of the time they're not, I'm thinking of like a James Fishback in Florida, right? He says things, he sounds like a progressive, and then he tells a black guy that he needs to be lynched. And he's having relations with like 15 or 16-year-old young girls.
Yeah.
So obviously he's not like us. But, you know, I just think that when we hear like an old Republican grandpa saying, the rich need to be taxed, et cetera, there is an avenue. Not all of them are Trumpers. I know a lot of people, obviously, as do you, growing up in Comac, who, there's like the actual MAGA, there's like MAGA adjacent, and then there are people who are just conservative. And it's sometimes it feels like the just conservative is the smallest group, and it probably is.
Mhm.
But again, I just, as much as my politics inform who I am, and I want to just like say like, push these people over here because they'll never agree with anything. I think my run inherently speaks to my desire to still try and find that common ground, though.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I've had Republicans come to my town halls. I've had Republicans show up. Not every Republican is commenting that I'm like a P word, F word under my Instagram, which is fine. Like I take the heat because that's what you do when you're a public servant, is you take the heat. And I like to give it as much as I can take it. So that's one thing about me is that I won't be like, if you're bad faith, I'll be petty to you because there's no point in trying to, if someone says, oh well, you know you're just you're a rapist, communist, this, that, that's not a good faith person with any grasp on reality. So for me, like, you can F with people like that a little bit if we're being honest. But in terms of people who, because I've, genuinely, I've had Republicans show up to my town hall and they say, I've never been to a Democrat event. I really don't agree with what you're saying, but I want to hear you out. And to me, that can't be lost on us, especially as young Democrats who feel so scorned by the older conservative guard in this country
Yeah.
that, you know what, at the end of the day, if someone is willing to admit they made a mistake or they had a mistake in perception, we should we should be open to them, because an unfortunate part of the human character is sometimes, when you feel like you've accepted something and you're not accepted by the group that you now want to be accepted with, that is actually a negative reinforcement. And you go back into your hole and you say, well, they're not accepting me, F them, et cetera, et cetera. We need to be accepting of people who have even been triple Trumpers at times because, will they change? Wholeheartedly, no, but we need to come to a point in this country where we are not in our silos. And, we are just as guilty of that as progressives, as Democrats, as anyone else. I'm a victim of the purity testing on the left daily, which is, again, fine because that's what I signed up for. But I think that we also need to be reasonable with our expectations of people whose opinions we're trying to change, I guess.
What is your take on MAGA Republicans like former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene?
I think that she is a true believer. And there's a little bit there to be said about MAGA. Now, it's hard because I think that the driving force for a lot of these people was the hatred and the fact that there was an underlying hatred within a lot of these people that allowed that anger to be stoked. But a lot of their anger is misplaced, obviously. Like we all know this. And I don't really know what to make of people like that because this is kind of like a newer phenomenon in terms of MAGA. You used to have like the Joe Walshes, right, who were like Kevin McCarthy sycophants, and they left the party because they were like, well, I don't have a home here. And I don't really see a lot of courage in this. People might disagree with me. I don't think that like Liz Cheney is very courageous. I don't think that
Neither do
Adam
I.
Kinzinger is very courageous. They they didn't jump, they were kicked. And I think that,
That's exactly right.
but I think MTG jumped.
Yes.
And I think that's interesting. And again, I don't like the things she said about Jewish people. I don't like the things she said about, you know, immigrants and just people of color in general.
Chasing
About
Parkland school shooting survivors.
exactly. So, there's a level of there's a level of a lack of education and perhaps a lack of empathy there.
Yeah.
But she's actually indicative of America sometimes being a very self-centered country in terms of its everyday populace. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Sometimes that has been the thing that has driven us towards excellence, and sometimes that has been the thing that has isolated us as a society. And right now it's isolating us, wherein, she only now realizes because she's not part of the club, right?
Yeah.
And once she had a real disagreement, she was no longer part of that club. And I do commend to some degree that that it did take some courage to do that. Um, but someone like Tucker, you've spent the last 30 years creating this problem. Just because you have some nuanced anti-war take on it doesn't mean that, you are now in the fold. Again, I commend that people are able to say the right thing when they say it. And obviously for Marjorie Taylor Greene, it's had far bigger repercussions than it has for someone like Tucker. Um, but I don't know. I really don't. I don't mean to be like long-winded and not give a great answer, but I just don't know because I want to think it's good faith, and she has. seemingly been more good faith. So maybe she's just an actress at the end of the day. I don't really know. Um, but
I kind of feel that she actually is in good faith. Like
no, I think she is a believer. I think she is a
yeah,
believer, but I think I think she may have been putting on an act for a bit of time in terms of putting
sure.
up with some of the stuff she disagreed with. Um, but
I
yes,
don't
I
think
didn't mean
Tucker
to.
is.
Yeah,
I don't think Tucker is in good faith though. Tucker is, not even a few weeks ago,
no, yeah,
he's still on his show with Piers Morgan sitting there asking him, "Why can't I just call gay people faggots?" It's like,
right,
"Whoa.
right, yeah,
Whoa,
yeah,
Tucker,
yeah.
like what are
That's
you
not even a free
saying?"
speech. That's not even a free speech argument. Like no one is stopping him from doing that, by the way.
Right.
It's just, it's just the fact that you have to make this like wokeness thing part of our political curriculum.
Or sitting there questioning whether Pete Buttigieg is actually gay. I mean,
I
Tucker
saw
sits there
that.
and he
Yeah,
like you said, like I'll give him credit for his anti-war take, and that's pretty much
sure.
where that credit ends.
But but not to interject, that anti-war take is completely without nuance because he really only cares about Palestinian Christians.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yes.
and
That's a great point.
and yes, he'll say it's a genocide, and he said something about Islam the other day. The point he made about Islam, about not disrespecting religion, had nothing to do with Islam. He doesn't care. It had everything to do with Christianity, and that he felt that Christianity had been mocked. But Tucker is a smart guy, and he knows that if I say as well, oh, he really shouldn't be, doing this to the Muslim populations, that he'll get of some short-sighted, you know, people that are on the anti-war left to say, well, he's a reasonable guy. He's not.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am an Orthodox Christian, right? My, in name, I'm not the most practicing that you'll ever meet, but I would never couch my criticism of what's going on in the Middle East with, look at what they're doing to the Orthodox Church. They are doing awful things to the Orthodox Church, and it hurts me as a Greek person of the faith. But it's not just happening to us and us. It's happening to people more broadly. And I think that's where I've been a little bit surprised with Marjorie because she's actually gone that extra step to say some of those things. I don't know how much to believe her. Trust is hard to gain and easy to lose. So right now we don't have much trust in that woman. She has a long way to go for us to believe what she's saying more. And there's a lot of things that I won't forgive from her because I do think that unless she comes out 100% and says, I was wrong, I was uneducated, I apologize to the families of the Parkland victims and et cetera, then,
Yeah.
but in terms of being a useful idiot, she's pretty good.
Speaking of idiots, let's talk about Nicola Lota.
Sure. Love to.
Um, listen, I there's few politicians I don't like as much as this man. So just to give it a rundown really quick, he does not live in the district that he represents.
Nope.
He has not held a single in-person town hall. He voted to gut health care programs and SNAP benefits, putting 96,000 Long Islanders, vulnerable Long Islanders at risk. Um, for no care or food. His brother inked out an exclusive contract with the military,
Yep.
something well, Nick claimed to have no part in. And
Yeah, okay.
just on
This guy
top
didn't,
of
I
everything,
didn't help my brother get a job at Wendy's, right? Like, come on.
right? It's like, and on top of everything, he supports unflinchingly everything that this administration has been doing. Um, I have this letter from Nicolota. I had started commenting on his posts on Facebook a while back. Um, Something that I personally actually I've actually stopped doing because he just angers me so much, and
Yeah.
my posts just don't. What is my keyboard worrying really doing? I mean,
Right.
he's just gonna
He knows you hate him. He knows he has
yes.
haters, right?
Yes,
Like,
and like he's a horse in a china shop. He's just gonna kick.
yeah,
That's his
yeah.
entire job. So like, I just want to know. I mean, how does this guy actually get in power? I mean, like there's such a list of things about him that are so unbelievably like disqualifying, and I'm just wondering like how. how did he trick our district into voting him in?
So how he got power was that the Republicans have, to their credit, an absolutely excellent machine in Suffolk County. The Democrats do not. It's crap, actually. So that's how he was at least empowered. He worked, he was chief of staff, he did, did local political work. Um, More than a lot of my predecessors who have run for the seat. Um, which then opens itself up to a problem, right? He's the local guy. He is, I mean, he sounds Long Island, right? If you told me he was from Comac, I'd be like, yeah. If you told me he was from East Northport, I'd be like, yeah. If you told me he was from Smithtown, I'd be like, yeah. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like he's a Western Suffolk guy, um, which is partially how he's been able to win. It's complete Democrat incompetence, and I've been nice, but I don't need to anymore because it's not like these people are being nice to me. John Avalon is a great example of elitist, out of touch, parachuted in from the city, an ego the size of
Yep.
Jupiter, and
Didn't
you
live in the
put him,
district.
it doesn't look, by the way, I'm the only candidate in this race, full stop, that lives in the district. So, and that includes people on our side of the aisle as well. And, you know, he, he was like, if we take John, for instance, right? He didn't even know to say that I'm on Long Island, right? It's like it's a pretty simple thing, if you're from Long Island. And it actually pisses us all off because we're weird and tribal like that. Is if you say
Yeah.
I'm in Long Island, you're like, well, unless you're 10 feet under, how are you in Long Island, right? Like,
Yeah.
but it was stuff like that he genuinely was able to pick up on and say, this guy with his pressed jeans, and his $5,000 college shirts from the city. By the way, look at the taxes he's paying on that property. That's one of those, but that's just last cycle. If you want to look at an entire overarching just carelessness from this party, it's that we run Democrats who are like, they're not all elitist and out of touch. And the closest we've gotten, um, the closest we've gotten is 2018. I got the endorsement from him, from Perry. He ran a kind of campaign that was exactly what you need to run out here, which is that you show up, you talk to people, et cetera, et cetera. We haven't really done that since then. We've run very distant campaigns where candidates stay in their silos. They don't really talk about much policy. And Lilota talks about policy in his own brash Republican way. He talks about how, the working class is being cheated by immigrants and et cetera, et cetera. And as wrong and asinine and stupid as he is, what the everyday person hears is, well, he's actually saying stuff and he sounds like he cares. And as much as I don't want to boil politics down to that, my point earlier about the absolute luxury and privilege of being politically engaged and aware to the high heavens is that you understand the rhetoric being co-opted there. And when you don't have Democrats, when you have a Democrat that says, Republicans for John Avalon and doesn't have any John Avalon Democrat for Congress signs, what you do is part of it is the permission structure that I said earlier, is that by making Lilota seem like this like middle class, middle of the road, everyman, Main Street Republican, he's actually way more relatable than John Avalon, who is a CNN host, ritzy
Yeah.
glitzy. He's married into the Hoover dynasty. He worked
Yeah.
for Giuliani. You know, and whether he's a nice guy or not doesn't matter because Democrats are trying this identity politics crap, and I'm not gonna really get into it this year, but they're doing it again this year in the primary where they think that the identity is everything. And they're basically putting up a person who doesn't know anything about it, the back of their hand, essentially, and can't be quick on their feet, doesn't show up, is scared to engage. This is the Democratic way in Suffolk County. And this is why we lose to Lilota. This is why we lose to Zeldin. We could be putting up Elmo, the friendliest person you'll ever meet. But if Elmo doesn't talk about universal health care, fixing our shorelines, ending corruption, this and that and the third. And they keep saying, well, MAGA's so mean and we're going to work together and we're going to
Right.
get stuff done. It's like, dude, shut the F up. Like, I don't want to hear this
Right.
stuff anymore. And honestly, that's why I'm running because the last, I've been thinking about it for a few years. Like, I want to run for something. I want to make myself heard. But it was the most starkest for me at the congressional level where I genuinely I've worked on campaigns, so I have a bit of know-how. I figured I'd be able to maneuver myself into a campaign. But it got to the point where I was like, I'm not waiting. until I'm 40 and credentialed and I'm delivered to the people on the silver platter. Because at that point, I'm not even like me anymore. You know what I mean? I need to run when I feel compelled to run, when honestly, I'm running because I'm pissed off. I'm angry. I'm tired of Democrats losing and being weak and like a bunch of lily pads, and I'm tired of it. And that's part of why we keep losing is because there's no one, and this isn't to pat myself on the back, because again, the only reason I'm running is because I didn't see anyone else with the same level of passion. But that there is not a Democrat out here with an iota of passion for serving, and then Lota comes out there and he's mad, he's angry, he's look what they're doing to you, this, that, look how I'm fighting for you, stirring up the passions. If all you have at the end of the day is baseline hatred and passion, he's going to win by default.
Yeah.
And that's why. That's really why. I don't mean to simplify it, but sometimes it is so simple as don't keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
It kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier with the idea of, you have to be for something and not just
Yes.
against, the
Yes.
other guy. And to your point about Lolota also, like I have this letter from Lolota. I still have it saved on my desk right there because I want to frame it one day because it's just such a piece of amazing political propaganda and,
Hmm.
frankly bullshit. Um, Lolota constantly touts on his Facebook page and on his social media. He doesn't really have any accomplishments in office to tout, so he has to sit there and say that he's the most bipartisan member of Congress that you'll
I'm
ever
more
see.
bipartisan than 97% of, okay, like, what does that mean?
Right.
Like, you're the swampiest of the swamp. Congratulations. Like,
Which is funny because he has like no discernible accomplishments. Like,
no, he has no
but
legislative victories. Yeah.
But what I love is in this letter that I got from him, Lolota sits there and says in the same breath that he's like one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. And then in the next sentence, he's like, and the evil Democrats are going to sit there. And it's like, how do people not put two and two together? That this guy is he's a snake oil salesman.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly what he is, and that's the perfect term to use it because, I always try and articulate this to people. It's like, okay, he's the most bipartisan. What is getting passed that's helping anyone? Everything that's getting passed is a tax cut, a cut to funding, more war, more bombs, more babies destroyed, like more families ripped apart, more immigrants, like, you know, kidnapped, raped, and deported. Okay, you're a bipartisan in hell. Like congratulations,
Yeah.
you and the Lucifer are like this. But what does that mean for everyday Americans? Like I want to see. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to see a Democrat that votes with Trump fucking 0% of the time because Trump has not
Yep.
put a single thing. Even his stock trading ban, right, was fake. It wasn't real. It was like it was a complete farce, and he's pushing it. He's pushing it. It's like, yeah, the guy's made $6 billion though, and Lolota doesn't say, Lolota is by
He made
rankings.
his he
It's
made his
somewhere
own
on my Instagram,
cryptocurrency. He
and
made
his
his
wife
own
did as well. Right,
cryptocurrency.
right.
It's like, what are we
I
doing?
mean, the thing about him is like, I think if you get to a point in society where you can't see that he's the most corrupt, probably person in American history, which like even conservatives in my life are like, yeah, I mean, it's pretty effing obvious. You know what I mean? Like, if you can't see that, you're probably not gonna see any of my more nuanced points.
Mhm.
And the thing about Lelota is it's on my Instagram somewhere. He's of a ranking of the top stock traders in the house. He's number six. 435 members of the House of Representatives, and he's number six,
How
right? And
unsurprising.
it is unsurprising though, because, look at this district, right? This district is actually very crucial because of how much tax money resides in this district, or how much potential tax money could reside in this district, right? I was looking through a list of the residents of my district the other day. Leon Black, um, uh, the guy from the city that always writes like those like paragraphs on Twitter. I forget what his name is right now.
Oh,
Bill Ackman.
yeah, Bill Ackman, yes.
Um, you know, those are some of the residents of my district. And that is why it's so important to have a person in this district who is holding those people accountable. Because Lolota is their pet, right? At the end of the day, he is their
Yeah.
pet. He's their plaything. They invite him to some glitzy fundraiser. He, is bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I can't believe this is my life. They give him money and he does them favors. And then that is how that is really how the swamp persists. And to have, this isn't an easy district to win, right? I am under no illusions of that. And but still, it would be such a coup for, the populist Democrats to have a Democratic representative in this district. And that's really what I'm trying to stress to people, both inside this district and outside. It's like we could have a Democrat, we could have a John Avalon in Congress, and like he and Gottheimer and Suozzi could be part of like the MAGA Democrat caucus, right? I don't care. To have an actual populist representing such a wealthy district, but also a district that is so struggling from wealth disparity and the income gap between the very top and the very bottom would, in my opinion, and this has nothing to do with me, Lucas, it would just have to do with a populist Democrat being elected to this district should send shockwaves across the country because it means that everything you've tried to do, the fact that you've tried to push down an establishment candidate down everyone's throat out here, hasn't worked. I've persisted. The fact that every single thing you've said about, my age and the fact that I'm quote unquote too radical, whatever that means, because if it's radical to actually believe in things, then, sue me, put me in jail. But,
It
you know,
reminds me again of Swazi and Mamdani. I remember
right,
Swazi had sat there and said something to the effect of like, Mamdani's, bus policy is extremely radical. And it's like, if your idea of radical is free busing, like that, I think you're the problem. Like,
right. And it was never even like we're worried about, you know, the homeless populations taking refuge on buses. It was always just like they weren't even smart about it. It was always just like so hysterical, so just, just without nuance.
yeah.
And that bothered me. But again, his win in like the mecca of business and money and billionaires sent shockwaves. Now, again, when I say send shockwaves, a rational person might think, well, the Democratic Party is surely going to learn from this. They won't. They won't. I'm saying that right now. They won't. No, no, no. I'm serious, and I'm not a Debbie Downer. I am an inherent optimist, which is why I'm 25 years old and I'm running for Congress. But the leadership of the party will not learn until they are forced to or unseated. And you know, I I started the campaign being very hard, like even against my own party at times, and I tamped that down a bit because I realized that I needed to get on the ballot and be seen by a voter class, a base that is much older than me and maybe is not as understanding of my anger. But what I found is that all age groups are just as angry and it doesn't really matter. And they actually like when I criticize Democrats. And again, not that I was trying to make a calculation and not really saying what I really think. I was always saying how I felt, but the fact of the matter is young people can complain all they want unless they come out and vote and make their voices heard, it's effectively into the wind. And so, that's the thing that I don't think a lot of people understand is that in order to win out here, you have to actually excite people of that cohort, whether they are Black Americans or Hispanic Americans or young Americans or Muslim Americans or Jewish Americans or whatever disaffected group you think of, they just need to see that you care, that you're there, that you're authentic. And that's why I've been running the most grassroots campaign on Long Island ever in the last 50 years. I haven't taken a cent of corporate money. I haven't gotten a lick of help or attention. Yeah, no, it's a good thing. I'm not saying I want that to change. I don't.
No, that's good.
You
That's
know,
good.
it is good, but everyone told me it wouldn't work. Right. I met with the chair of the party. He said he liked me. He's like, I hope you're successful, but I just don't see how this works because you're young and you have no backing, you have no quote unquote credential. But in my opinion, the only credential the founders said was that you need to care about your country and be of
Mm.
age. And so, if you want the credentials, we can run down the credentials, right? I founded Students Demand Action, a gun safety group at NYU as the inaugural president. I worked for the American Constitution Society when I was in law school. We worked alongside former Senator Russ Feingold, trying to counterbalance the Heritage Foundation and the I'm blanking on the name of them right now, And I've worked on campaigns, I've worked in journalism, I've done a lot. So I it's kind of been strange because I've been more of the outsider, but I've paradoxically had more political experience than my opponent in the primary, which, everyone says, "Oh, you're so young, you have no experience. What are you, 12 years old?" I'm like, what I lack in 40 years at a firm, I more than make up for in intelligence, passion, work ethic, and drive. I feel like, and this isn't even to toot my own horn because I always felt like this was possible for anyone. But I've proven that you don't need $5 million to at least even just be visible in the primary. You need work ethic, a few good people around you who are going to work hard and, hold each other, including the candidate, accountable, and a message that resonates. And for me, the message always goes a lot farther than the calculations, the consultants, I'm on with Anderson Cooper every 5 days. Okay, well, who watches that? No offense. You know what I mean? Like, who's watching
Yeah.
cable? If you're not out in the community, you're not out meeting people, you're not out trying to make a difference and walking the walk, then people won't vote for you. And unfortunately, we've had a plethora of Democrats who just nationwide who politics has never been their MO. They just want the title. They want someone pushes them in, someone recruits them. We need more people who, I guess, like myself, felt like compelled because there was no other option. And how we win is by showing people that there is an authenticity and a realness left in politics. If that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely makes sense. And also, to to kind of speak a little bit positively of your age too, in a sense,
Yeah,
and
please
this
do,
might
please
just,
do.
and this just might be as a fellow young person, but I mean, like, we have some very large tech problems coming down the pipeline with regard to AI and how that's going to affect labor. And we're going to need young people that understand that issue.
Yeah.
You look at like congressional hearings around Facebook and Meta, and it's like
God. They're like, what
they
is the
don't
Facebook? How do I power up the Facebook? And you're like, holy crap, you're not even
right,
in the
like,
same world as me right now.
yeah, they do not understand the
No.
technology. And we're coming up on technology that is going to quickly outpace them if we don't have people in Congress that
Yeah. Oh
are
yeah. Oh yeah.
knowledgeable and of the era
Right.
that dealt with this technology, that grew up with this technology. So
Right.
much of Congress right now is just wholly unprepared for that.
And the issue with that is that, and maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't. What that does is sometimes almost radicalize us as Gen Z to think that all boomers are like thieves, basically, and they only care about themselves and they only care about maintaining their power. Wherein, if you actually come with me to these events, it's all boomers and some even, silent Gen who are saying, well, A, it is just all boomers, and we can get to that. But B, they're telling me, you know, you don't have a grip on what's happening technologically. So it's not as if that generation themselves it's just those of whom have, because they've accumulated the most money and wealth. And so therefore they're allowed to say, I'm leaving office or not. And it's not like your grandmother and her friends that she plays mahjong with. It's like, it's the Pelosi's and the McConnells of the world who have accumulated, even though they're older than boomers, I think. They've accumulated so much wealth and power that they can effectively never be told your time is now.
Yeah.
The only thing that can tell them your time is now is Father Time himself. And that is a problem because, again, you are going to these events where there's a disconnect because young people think that all old people care about is themselves. And you go to these events and old people are saying, where are the young people? Where are you guys? And it's like it's like a generational warfare where we actually just need to see our similarities where our grandparents had to do nuclear drills. Well, we had to do school shooter drills. Our
Yeah.
grandparents fought against an unjust war that was killing millions of unarmed civilians. Our generation is trying to fight several unjust wars that are killing and displacing millions. There are so many genuine similarities. The only thing I'll say is that generation walked the walk when the time
Yeah.
was upon them, and our time is now. I'm not saying like I'm not one of young people. They're never going to do anything. Nothing's ever going to change. Like your time is whenever you decide it is. And so if you decide tomorrow that I will now be, doing what I need to do, then it doesn't matter when you start. It only matters if you do it. And but that is just such a disconnect there, right? I went to No Kings last week, and somebody asked me, she's like, well, what can we do to get more young people here? And other than everything I said, there are some rhetorical things, right? It's like, who actually knows who Bob Dylan is? Maybe we shouldn't be doing like a Bob Dylan campfire song at all of these protests because Dixie's were a long time ago, man. I'm sorry. Like it's just not that anymore. And so much of
So
our
yeah,
resistance
it's funny you
is
said that.
yeah, I just want to get this last point out. So
Yeah,
much of our resistance is like almost a century old in
yeah.
ideas and formatting. And you know what? It's a call to action. If young people want to be the change, then effing step up, elbow your way into the room, elbow your way into the table, and make your voice heard because the only way we achieve anything is by grabbing it and taking it by the horns.
Yeah, it's so funny that you brought all of that up because I sit there and like, I talk to a lot of younger people, our age, and there's this certain level of like nihilism
Yes.
towards politics now that it's like they've they've largely been in a world where politics has never really worked for them.
Right.
I mean, um, as much as I love Barack Obama, like the response to the recession was fundamentally wrong.
Awful. Awful.
And no young person, at least in my proximity, has been under a government that really truly benefited them during a crisis. And it's funny, the first example that a lot of young people bring up is the COVID checks. And it's kind of mind-boggling because that in and of itself I think was the right response. It's just being done by like the most disingenuous, bad actor you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Um, and the other part of that too, not to just keep derailing this conversation. I know we've been talking a
No,
while,
no,
but
it made me think of something interesting. So I'm glad you said
but
that.
like you said, like not everyone knows who Bob Dylan is, and as much as I grew up in a
I love
household
Bob
full of
Dylan. Don't get me
musicians, and
wrong.
I
Yeah, don't get me
I
wrong.
love
Like,
Bob, but like I have noticed that there has been this like utter lack of commentary from artists right now. Like I'm just now starting to like see artists like actually take a stand here. Like Dropkick Murphys, I've noticed are like really being outspoken. But I mean,
right.
generally speaking, you look at these huge pop stars that have no reason to censor themselves. They have established themselves and they are, well within their right to say whatever they want, and they don't.
So
And
yeah,
yeah,
no, I didn't mean to cut you off. There's two things that reminded me of, and I'll go to the first thing after. But the, I am not so I went to school for American political history, but there's some overlap between politics and art. There always has been. And it feels like there's probably never been a time in our history where artists are actually just simply the most disconnected from the art themselves. Like, this is not to castigate any Taylor Swift fans, right? But, she's a talented woman, artist, all of that. But even the way she operates, right, is that she re-releases albums, re-record. Like, I don't know everything behind that, but it just feels like artists used to, especially rap, right? Like rap at one point was
yeah,
such social commentary.
yeah.
And I'm not saying it's
Metal.
not in a yeah, metal of the same. In a lot of ways, rap is still social commentary. Pop is still social commentary, but it's social commentary to the fact that everything has been, what's the right word? Just like sanitized. Like I just feel like in a lot of ways at the very top, like things like, are feel more corporate. Everything needs
Yeah.
to be correct and now we're not talking about like, okay, artists curse, they talk about sex, but challenging power is something that you see less
Yes.
in artists and music. And I don't know whether that's a good job of the music industry. And I'll tell you, so you mentioned that I was endorsed by Blue America. I don't know if you've done your research on Blue America, but Blue America was until December, until he sadly passed, run by Howie Klein. Howie Klein was the former president of, to my understanding, was Warner Brothers Music.
Hmm.
And he was the president at a time where like he was really emphasizing the importance of speech. And this was the 80s and the 70s. And the 70s more so than the 80s, but the 70s, there's a lot of social commentary in music. And now it just feels like there isn't as much. And again, that's not to say that, Taylor Swift sucks, right? But Taylor Swift in the 60s would have partially probably been popular because of her resistance to something
Yep.
cultural or that she stood for a counterculture in some way. And that is married up with my first point, which was that you said something about Obama, and then it clicked in my head, is that if you look at the last like 30 years, right, there's been three times when people have been really excited and really let down. The first is Clinton in the
Hmm.
90s. And I'll bring up my mom again as a perfect example because my mom was really excited about Clinton. She was younger than we are now when he was elected. She was like 21, 22. And she said that she didn't love his policies. And so that was one thing. She felt like he, was just kind of giving in. But she said the Lewinsky thing really kind of made her not be a Democrat anymore because
Hmm.
she was looking at it as at the time was 97. She's 27 years old, right? That's kind of like I don't know how old you are. I'm 25. It's kind of the way I look at someone who's 20, right? I'm like,
Right.
oh, like we're the same age group, but you're kind of a baby still. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I remember, she'd tell me many times like the fact that they closed ranks. They said, and not only did they close ranks, but they made that woman's life miserable.
Yes.
And not just the Clintons, but a lot of Democrats. And that was one time. Then you have Obama, right? Obama as being hope and change, anti-war, becoming the droner in chief, having everybody from JP Morgan basically sleeping at the White House with him
Bailed out the
and
banks.
bailed out the banks. But not just that, it's he just didn't use the power of the presidency. And people say, well, he was the first African American president. Well, he would have been the first African American president regardless of whether he did stuff or not. He would
Yeah.
have been attacked regardless of whether he did stuff or
Yep.
not. In my opinion, and I've never been the man, I'm not in his head. Maybe there are things bigger than me that I don't understand. But that was another thing. And then in Biden, it's not so much that people had so much faith in Biden or they were like, wow, he's going to be like some like progressive king, but it was the idea that early on to his administration, they did so many good things that they allowed to fall apart at a time. Child tax credit is the perfect thing.
Yeah.
The what Build
Student
Back Better
loans.
originally, yeah, what Build Back Better was before it was actually, whatever it ended up becoming was like probably the most transformational piece of legislation since the Great Society, genuinely,
Yeah.
for the
Yes.
American economy, for the American worker. So once you realize, like at the time, I had no expectations for the guy, and I'm seeing like he's okay with this bill being put forward, you know, and then just seeing the way the party capitulated to the corporate establishment, like mansion and cinema, that broke a lot of people, I think,
Yeah.
because it was like we thought that we were actually making a difference, and it was all lip service the entire time, and that's three eras where my mom's 56 now. She was in her
Yeah.
early 20s at the time. That is 30 plus years of nihilism, of not
Yep.
delivering for people. And then they wonder why, we're not excited by someone like Gavin Newsom. Like, I'm not. And I'm pretty open to, like, I'm not afraid. You know what? It's like, you know what, Sam, if I win, there needs to be a few Democrats that just say the quiet part out loud. And if that means I last one term, two terms, but I know I did what I needed to do, I promise you, I won't be like one of those people that is clinging on to their career. If I know I did the right thing, then I'm happy. So for me, I
Yeah.
have no problem saying it. If I win, I don't want him being the nominee. I don't want Kamala being the nominee again. There's a lot of people that I don't want anywhere near power because I don't think they meet the moment.
Yeah. Agreed.
And, I honestly don't know who that really would be for 28. We don't have the best options. And I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying that. Um, because someone might not think I'm a good option. You know what I mean? Everything's up to the eye of the beholder. But at the end of the day,
I'm
I
like,
personally am not excited.
I'm starting to see like some people that I think are interesting. Like I really like Rokana. I
I
don't
like
know
Roe as
if,
well. I like
I
Roe.
don't know if he actually has the ability to like clinch a general. Um,
there's a charisma fear on my part is that politics has become such a show
yeah,
that even for myself, right? Like 10, 15 years ago, if I was running, the way I would be talking would be different.
yeah,
And I feel like we have slid intellectually as a country in terms of like how we talk about everything, but especially politics.
yeah,
And so to that point, I don't think that he can. That's the problem with Newsom is that if he was a good Democrat and an honest actor, he would probably be the perfect candidate, other than the fact that he looks like the American Psycho. But no, but again, I'm honest. You know what I mean? Like he might be a nice guy, and if we got a couple beers with each other, like he might be cool to talk to about like basketball or something. But do I want
I think he'd
do I
tell you
want my
exactly what you want to hear.
exactly?
Yeah,
And but we all friends like that, right? But you don't want that person to be in. You don't want that person making decisions. The person who, you know what I mean? Like, where's the wind blowing? I'll set my sails out that way. And it's all part of your question of why are we losing? Why are we losing to people like Lotto? Why are we losing to people like Trump? It's like, no, this is why. This is
yeah,
why. And the inability of the party to criticize a president who hasn't been in office in 9 years now is part of what holds us back. Because young people were essentially christened under the assumption that, and I'm talking about people older than us, right? I'm talking about like millennials now, that they were younger than us even, like when he was elected. And what did he do? Like, and not, maybe not him, like, I'll take that away from it. What did the Democrats do at that time? Right? We
yeah,
lost 1,000 seats across the country, locally, statewide, et cetera. And that's not all down to him, obviously. That's down to our party apparatus. We're running candidates that are just weak. We are, at the time, and I'm honest about this, at the time, I wasn't really like, in 2016, I wasn't really a supporter of Bernie's because I was like 15 and I was kind of just starting to get to know and understand what politics was. But I even thought at the time, I'm like, they're not treating this guy fairly. Like,
yeah,
and they weren't. And the fact that the Democrats can talk so much about democracy and consistently not uphold democratic values. I'm thinking of like Dean Phillips, right? I don't like the guy.
yeah,
I honestly probably like Biden better than I like him, like politically speaking. But I mean, he was just steamrolled, destroyed his career over, and he was right.
yeah,
I mean, he was more than vindicated. And
yeah.
I think that we don't have the space for democracy means that we lose.
I would also wager that Bernie Sanders was one of those inflection points where people were really excited and then really let down by what
Yes.
happened.
Yes.
Because I mean, the amount of young people I've talked to who sit there and they're just like, "Oh, I was going to vote for Bernie and then I voted Trump."
You're
I
like,
mean,
what?
like,
Yeah.
not that I understand that jump, but I do because
Right.
in some sense they're both talking about burning down the system. They're
Yes.
both talking
Yes.
about burning down the house, and they both identified the problem correctly, and just one of them wasn't the solution.
Right.
And when the Democrats didn't back Bernie, the base just left.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's they just left. And I think that that's one of those, huge inflection points that I think we're going to look back on, a couple of decades from now as like a serious turning point. Hopefully we're not looking back with, from the apocalyptic tundra that we're going to be living in. But, um,
Right.
hopefully it's, something that we could learn from. I do want to ask you just like one or two more policy questions. I
Yeah,
know we've been
please.
talking a while, but, um,
No worries.
uh, one of the huge problems that we have on Long Island right now is these private equity firms buying up houses.
Right.
You talk about this on your website. Can you just go into this issue a little bit more and explain like some possible solutions that we have for this?
Sure. I mean, I'm not really like a fan of private equity, in general. I mean, whether that be what they do to small businesses, what they've done to even like athletics in this country, like soccer. I love soccer. They've destroyed soccer for the working class. Um, and it was always, the working man's sport. In terms of housing, I mean, I, I just don't, there's such a gray area, right? Because I freely admit that, my grandparents made money in real estate investment. And so, like, yes, it's an investment opportunity. but I'm also probably more aligned with just the everyday person and worker. And so I kind of bristle at the idea that maybe not for like a family of investors, but the idea that private equity needs to be doing these things, I don't really understand the legality of it. Why should housing, which I consider a human right, be part of a portfolio, right? Why should a block be created into an HOA? Now, I briefly lived in like a it wasn't an HOA, but it was like a small like little community, while I was moving in the district. And there's the president basically of the thing, and he would just harass me daily, 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 daily. And you realize that private equity wants little like fiefdoms like this, where they can
Mm.
control what you put on your grass, how you live your life. I've seen people get ordinances for having their garage open in the summer. And it's like, you know what? If we're at the point where I can't do what I want on my property because I'm not really the owner of the property, I have no rights to this property. I mean, renters have more rights than people who live in HOAs in properties that they own, right? And just what private equity does is it lessens the housing stock, it drives up the price. This is what we all know, but I think what people don't often realize is that they are working in tandem with the government to do this. Private developers, like BlackRock, private equity, and the government are all in cahoots basically. And this is a 1990s, I think six or seven, uh, bill that they passed. It was Gingrich and Clinton. It was the Faircloth Amendment, which essentially limited um, it froze affordable housing stock. It also kind of lessened the amount of money that the federal government could spend on developing affordable housing. I mean, that's catastrophic. I can't really think of a good reason to do that other than, Clinton 90s fear mongering about crime, you know. Seriously, like I can't really think of a good reason for that. And so, undoing something like that, banning private equity from not just buying housing, but I'll stick to housing for now, just banning private equity from that in total, and you know, trying to facilitate purchases for first time buyers again, right? The first time home buying age shouldn't be like it's like it's the 60s now, right? Or like late
It's really,
50s. I
yeah,
mean,
it's late. It's late.
like honestly, sometimes I think like how backwards we are as a country that all of these things are very known in the public consciousness and there isn't like a mass uprising. Like I'm not calling for anything like that, but I'm just saying like I don't really understand how we've kind of been pacified as a society to be like, yeah, man, like our our wage to housing or sorry, like wage to cost of living growth, if you look at the graph, like that is genuinely like worse than like the French Revolution. It's
Mm.
genuinely worse than no, it is. It is.
No, I
Like the,
know.
the the class disparity is now worse in America and has been for probably the last 20 years than it was in, you know, during the time of the French Revolution, during the time of Marie Antoinette. Like, you think about that because she is someone that we look at as a global society as like the the barometer of out of touch elitism. And we have more than blown past that as a society. And many of us, it's not just the states, right? Like as a global society, we're living in such an unjust and uh, unequal time. And that, whether that be for housing or otherwise, it's just ridiculous. And it doesn't make any sense why not why, but almost how the people haven't organized like better. And they're being stifled by a number of different things. So I don't blame the people for that. But it's almost it's like so like you're just waiting for the day where the people where it clicks for everyone and we all kind of rise up and say, we've had enough of this and we are not going back,
I
and
mean, I think
hopefully
you
I can be a
see
part of that, but
some of that with No Kings. But I
a little
also
bit.
think a lot of that goes to what we were talking about before, which is that nihilism of
Yeah.
we haven't seen government really work for us. And that's also why I think, you've seen such this huge online embrace of Zoran Mamdani, even from the
Yeah.
right, because he's getting things done and he's only
Yeah.
been in office for like 4 months,
4 months, yeah, something like that.
and it's like he's managed to like get significant policy already on the table that people
Yeah.
were telling him just a couple months ago that was impossible.
Was, yeah,
Ho-
impossible. Exactly.
Hochul has already moved on several of these issues, especially when it comes to like universal childcare, something that she was like, on the fence about at first. Now she's completely, they already have like a universal 3K program.
But that's why they
Um,
tried to stop Bernie. At the end of the day, is
yeah,
that is the only thing stronger than money is votes, right?
yeah,
It's just a raw bringing of people to the poll. Like, they could spend $100 million genuinely on my primary opponent, but if he continues to be completely unknowledgeable about anything, to not show up to events. No, I'm sorry, I don't care anymore, honestly, because I've been the nice, playing it, but I consistently hear things about myself that are not true. So I'll counteract those with some real home truths. And if he continues to be a completely unintellectual person that doesn't know things, that doesn't want to show up, that is asking for security at events with like five people, is very indicative of a person that will never work. No, I'm serious. It's like genuinely
yeah,
not even funny. Like, we had an event in a library. Apparently, he asked for security. Okay, sure. Neither of us are known. No one cares about either of us. You have to be humble when you run for office. Humble enough to know that you are just a member of the community at the end of the day. Should I be congressman? Okay, that's a different story. But like, no, seriously, no one's coming after Lukas Ventouras. I feel totally fine. And but that's more just to highlight the ridiculousness of the choices nationwide. It's like you can choose the road most traveled to a lack of success, or you could try something new. And I freely admit that backing me is trying something new. But backing me is to back someone who cares about their constituents, who won't disappear should he lose this election, like most Democrats who get into leadership because they want a plaque, in the Longworth House office building. I don't care about that. Give me the worst office, give me a shoebox, give me a mop closet. Just if I have that power of a vote, then I have power, right? I have a say. And, again, supporting me means that you're going to support someone that doesn't support war, that doesn't support cutting of healthcare, that actually supports mothers and fathers and families and the working class. And as Democrats, we can keep putting up people who like are glitzy and like have ads where they're like in the sky, but that honestly is indicative of where their head is at. It's in the sky. It's not on the
yeah.
ground. It's not with the people. And I think it's gotten to the point where I'm just going to be honest about what's going on out here because I have nothing to lose. Um, And you might say, what do you mean you have nothing to lose? Like, you have a no, no. For me, I am winning right now. I am going to win and I am going to be successful because that's how I carry myself. And this success has come in me being honest about people in our party or otherwise. And so, yeah, I mean, we won't win this general if I don't win the primary. And it's less to do with me than it is to do with the fact that the people behind me are serious and the people backing me seriously want actual policy to be implemented. And I didn't take 6 months and 16 different consultants to figure out where I stand on healthcare, right? Like, if you
Mm.
need a consultant and a lab grown platform to understand, like, I'm glad you're laughing because it's gotten to the point of being so ridiculous that like people don't realize how stupid this is, that it took you 6 months to come up with an issues page. I'm sorry, I had an issues page back when I had a free Wix website and I had no money,
Yeah.
and I'm not being nice about it anymore because I'm angry. I'm only in this race because I'm angry. And should I lose to someone who I don't think has the best interests of Suffolk at heart, I will be disappointed. Will I work for the party still to make sure we beat Lota? Absolutely, because that's more important at the end of the day. But it's not just about getting Democrats elected for me because we have lots of Democrats in office already who are do nothing Democrats. It's
Right.
about electing a Democrat with the the passion and the know-how and the wherewithal to not just stand up for what's right, not just stand up to their own party, not just if needed be a lone voice like a Barbara Lee against the Iraq War vote in 2002, I think it was.
Mm.
It doesn't matter. Like, people don't want to see this glitzy, fresh, pressed Ken doll out of a box because at the end of the day, they're stupid and they don't know what they're talking about. They want to see someone who actually cares. And honestly, the only reason I'm talking like this is because I care too much, maybe at the end of the day, that it's not really about me. Because if someone like me was running, who I thought had a better chance, I would be supporting that person. You know what I mean? But I built a campaign because I felt like people out here deserved a different option. They deserve someone who cares, who does their homework, who reads, who understands what's going on, who actually knows, who was in office 2 terms ago, who can actually say, and this isn't even just, you might think, oh, you're just against your primary right now. This is not really even about the primary. This is about Democrats writ large,
Yeah.
especially on Long Island. Is you see when you go to vote, we have absences in local races. We have judges that are cross-endorsed with the Republicans. What the hell are we doing? Like, seriously, I don't understand what we're doing anymore. And it's gotten to the point where I'm not going to couch my criticisms in not hurting someone's feelings because, quite frankly, no one has tried to spare my feelings, and nor had they should. No, no, no one should try and spare my feelings. But we as a group should not be sparing the feelings of the people in charge out here, especially when all they've done is lost and crammed candidates down our throats who are unrelatable and unmistakably unremarkable in terms of being a political
Mm.
leader. Could they, you know, could they write a book about something? Could they be a good basketball coach? That's not really the question. The question is, are they the right person? Do they have the requisite passion and intelligence? And intellect isn't an elitist thing on my part. Intellect just means, are you curious? Are you curious to know everything? Are you curious to make sure that everything you're doing is right? And, there are Democrats nationwide that are doing this. Again, you could take me out of it. There are Democrats nationwide that are doing this. We need them to be believed in. We need them to prosper. We can't have more Democrats like Manchin in office because then that is further creating a cycle of nihilism, as you said. Is that okay? We finally did the damn thing. We worked hard. We got this Democrat to office, and then he did nothing. She did nothing. I'm definitely sitting home next time. And that's how you get a Lolota. That's how you get a
Yep.
Trump, and it's
Exactly.
it's not it's not that difficult. We all know this, right? I don't think what I'm saying is like TED Talk dissertation worthy. It's a very obvious me noticing as like a regular guy. But if there isn't like a regular guy speaking to the rest of the regular people, and there's a bunch of politicians who are recruited by consultants who think they're God's gift, then you're going to have a real issue with, even like I've had like 5 town halls already. I've had more town halls than any of my past candidate predecessors or any of the actual members of Congress who have preceded me. And I'm 25-year-old, like with not as much money as anyone else, and all I have with me is a desire to lead. And
And the incumbent
you
you're
know,
running against refuses to hold a town hall.
well, he has the teletown halls, which are pre-screened, and he runs that off the call after 5 minutes because he gets his feelings hurt.
He's I was on the last teletown hall, and I have to tell you, I was screaming at my phone after like 15 minutes. And it's so frustrating because like I sit there when one of the jobs that I have is I work for the Long Islander newspaper.
Okay,
And we during the fall festival, we table at the fall festival, and next to us is always the Republican tent, which
okay,
I think is just God trying to piss me off. But
a little bit probably.
but right down the road, there's also the Democratic tent. Nobody's there.
Nope.
They're not handing anything out. The Republican tent is constantly busy. They're constantly handing things out. Their candidates are there. The only candidate that I've seen at the Democratic tent is Craig Herskowitz.
I love Craig, by the way. Great
Craig's
guy.
great. He's gonna be on this podcast in 2 weeks.
Good.
But
Good.
um, you know, the entire apparatus out here is wimpy at best. It's really
Yeah,
it needs people like you and new Democrats right now
I
to kind
appreciate
of
that.
bolster it right now.
Yeah, because you know what? We shouldn't be afraid to say that they have a better operation. Now, are they unethical? Of course, and that's part of why it's better. But if you want to look at the substantive organization showing up, they have us. They have our clocks cleaned any day of the week. And
Yep.
you know what? Lolota shows up. He does. He shows up to events. He went to a Pride thing once. I mean, you can't say that he
As
doesn't
long as
know
there's
how
food.
to. I mean, yes, but you can't say that he doesn't know how to at least be a politician. Now,
Yeah.
his idea of being a politician is you show up, you pay lip service, and you can still do whatever the F you want because people have no other options, or the Democrats are so weak that I win by default. We need to rewire Republicans' brains in Suffolk to realize that the lip service isn't enough. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
the lip service is more than what we're giving them sometimes, right? I mean, it is. I've been to these events. I've worked on these campaigns. I've seen candidates not show up. I've seen John Avalon stay out east. I'm sorry. If we are going to win, we need a full autopsy in Suffolk County. We need to say, you might be a good guy, but you made a mistake. Your campaign made a mistake. This isn't a personal aside, right? I think everyone, for the most part, is very nice. But being nice doesn't mean you're a winner,
Yeah.
right? And I like I want to think that I'm a winner because I don't rest on my laurels. And I try and make sure that every stone is turned and all I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Because even recently, when I felt like maybe I'm going to win the primary, which wasn't always the case because I was building, obviously. Even now, when I felt like I'm probably going to win the primary, I'm not resting at all. I'm going out east every opportunity I can. I'm on every Zoom I can. I'm at every protest I can because at the end of the day, you know, like I said about trust, it's very hard to win over and very easy to lose. And now that I feel like I have some people's trust, I need to show them that I wasn't paying them lip service, that I wasn't showing up because I wanted something out of them. That the relationship that I built with some of these constituents is actually genuinely built on a shared desire to see good things happen and to see results be delivered for Suffolk. And I'm confident enough to say that probably a lot of candidates that have run out here in the last few years haven't had the same relationship with their supporters that I do. I speak to my supporters very frequently. I go to their house, we break bread. I am trying to genuinely be a part of the community. That's why I live in the community. That's why, should I win, I won't be relocating to some part of the district where I can't be seen or just to DC. Like I will still be in Northport. You will still see me in the village getting a slice of pizza. If you want to yell at me, you can yell at me. That's part of my job. And I genuinely feel that way. And Democrats have been putting up people understand that that won't be the way they operate. It is painfully obvious. You know what I mean?
100%. 100%. So, question, do you have any debates coming up with your primary opponent?
It's just forums, which are
Just
good,
forums. Yeah.
but I want the opportunity to kind of respond to certain things
Yeah,
sometimes,
I would love to
personally.
see you. I would love to see you guys
Um,
debate.
I'm not sure that the interest is there
Okay.
on the other side. But I can't speak. I don't know. I just haven't heard anything. I know we have
Okay.
forums. Whether some of these forums become debate-like, I don't have any control over that. But I would love to listen. I would love to debate. I know that you have to know your strengths when you run for office, and it can't come from a place of hubris, but a place of confidence. And I'm very confident in my ability to communicate. I'm very confident in my ability to argue, quite frankly. And I'm very confident that Lota wouldn't want to debate me. I'm pretty confident about that because I'm going to bring the receipts. I'm not going to be like John up there talking about like the pageantry of DC and how he's basically defecating on the Constitution, in some like weird flowery way. Like yeah, he is defecating on the Constitution. You got to say it in a way that everybody can understand. You can't be like this. Listen, I love academia. I went to NYU. I really take pride in that stuff. But there is such thing as an over intellectualization of politics where you almost sound like you're talking down to people. And that goes for even highly educated people who sound like, are you lecturing me right now? Or are you saying, or are you having a conversation about things that can impact my life? Right. And to be able to go up there on the debate stage and tell the loader, you're a liar, you're corrupt, all these things that we just haven't seen before. Um, treat I think we need candidates that treat this political moment like the complete dogfight that it is, and
Yes.
recognize that as nice and listen, as nice as it would be, and as much as I would want us to live in like an era of American politics of chivalry, and we don't,
Yeah, agreed.
and sometimes it does kind of suck because I have my personality that sometimes I can I'm like like whatever. But by nature, I'm very nice. I'm not really confrontational, but I will be if need be. And do I wish that I could be going up there and talking about the percentage I would like to shave off of this, or what I would like to do to this, or that? Of course I would. But we don't live in an era where that is necessarily like looked at favorably, or not like looked at favorably, but you will be tuned out probably. And you
Yeah,
kind of need to have
yeah,
the showman aspect of politics as much as you have the intellectual, genuinely legislative aspect of politics. And I like to think I have both. I'm pretty good at speaking to people, and like I said, I'm good at arguing. I'm proficient. And I just think that at the end of the day, Suffolk deserves a person that looks like them, that sounds like them, that thinks like them, that is of them. And this doesn't mean that you have to be born and raised, but it means that you have to have a significant attachment to this district, and you need to live in the district. And, you know, I think it's fairly obvious to see when a politician is phony or not, but we are just inundated with so many phony people, for lack of a better word, that, you know, I think that a lot of people, especially our generation, have forgotten that it's possible, and they see someone like Mamdani as a one-off. And we need to show them it's not a one-off, that it's a movement, you know?
yeah. That that I think is a grave concern of mine. Like I don't want people to think that Mamdani is a one-off, and like
Right.
there's things that are giving me a lot of hope towards
Yes.
that. I'm seeing a lot of candidates starting to pop up all across the country that are really promising. They're really, really, you know, interesting candidates that seem to, mean what they say.
Right.
And I think this moment needs hope.
Yeah.
I think this moment right now, like we cannot allow despair to take over and, allow these thoughts of nihilism to keep us from getting off the couch.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, we are in a dogfight right now. And
Yep.
one of the things that, I've been so, uh, focused on and trying to get out there is like, war has changed. Like, sure, we see war that is going on in Lebanon right now and Gaza right now and Israel and Iran. That is war, but war is also technology and information.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
And
course.
we have been in a full-fledged assault for the past like 10, 15 years from outside influences and internal influences
Yep.
that are antithetical to our way of life, that are completely unconstitutional, and people are not recognizing the attack that's happening. And I think, you know, going circling back to the beginning of this conversation, you know, politics was never really like I was always raised in a political household, like
Sure.
one of the few things my parents ever actually agreed on was politics. And, I'll give them a lot of
That's
credit for
nice.
that.
So that's rare.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and to this day they still agree on politics, and again, it's the only thing that they agree on. But for me though, like it was a point of pride and a point of community to actually know what was going on, and to
Yeah.
be aware of your surroundings politically, economically, etc. And this rampant nihilism that has kind of forced people to tune out is also making us lose the war.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's, I'm so concerned, with everything going on that like this podcast, which was originally just supposed to be an entertainment podcast for like movies and stuff.
Right.
No,
Yeah. I
I,
see the posters in the back. Yeah.
I have to sit here and actually, come out and say some stuff here and try and get, voices like yours amplified. If I have that ability, I'm going to do it,
Right. Right. And yeah,
and
you should, and that harkens back to the thing you said about culture not being as political anymore.
yes.
You know?
Even going to, you know, realistically, like I know that I'm never going to be a politician. Like it's just as much as I'm into politics, I'm never going to be a politician. But as an artist, like
So
for
the same
me,
thing.
like,
So the same thing.
well, don't jinx me, knocking on wood. But as an artist, like I felt like there is something I have to do in this moment to respond here,
Yes.
and
Yes.
whether that's, I made an album this year that is very political, but I
Hmm.
mean, if it's that or if it's going on, hosting a podcast and trying to get voices like yours out there, I'm doing whatever I can,
Right.
because this is the moment where we have to do whatever we can.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and just to put a
Yeah.
button on all of that. So, like I said, this is generally an entertainment podcast where we usually talk about movies and music on here. Um, so I think I have to ask you the most important question,
Sure.
which is, have you seen any good movies recently?
Yeah. My girlfriend and I just saw the drama. Um,
Great film.
which okay, you saw it. I don't know
Yeah,
if all your viewers have seen it, so I'll limit what I say. I was pretty surprised, but I had not the highest expectations going into it because I think I maybe like misheard what the premise of the movie was. And my girlfriend is a huge cinephile, so my media consumption has really lessened during this campaign, as you might imagine, but she's still kind of keeping me towed to like just life and everything outside of politics. So yeah, I saw the drama on Saturday. I thought it was really good. I unsurprisingly, unsurprised to find out that a lot of couples like clashed over it. My girlfriend and I did not. We kind of were on the same
that's
page
good.
about it.
That's
It is
good.
good. It is good. I was actually anxious. I will not lie to you. She'll see this and she'll laugh. I was actually anxious going into watching the movie because she said to me tongue in cheek, mind you've been together almost 3 years. She said to me tongue in cheek, like, oh, apparently like a lot of like couples come out of this like breaking up. And I'm just like, I'm just an anxious person by nature, especially for her. Like, she's the love of my life. So I'm like, oh no, what does this mean? Like, is she gonna see something in the movie that makes her think like she's too good for me or something? It wasn't like that at all. It was really just like, to me, it was really a reflection on when you're in a relationship, who do you prioritize? Is it
Yeah.
yourself or is it your partner? And I thought it was I thought it was interesting. I'll say I don't like again I don't want to say too much, but I honestly was disappointed by the film, by like what was going on in the film. I felt that it was unfair, if that makes sense.
Well, I've heard that, one of the things that I, commented on after watching the movie, and I'm not going to spoil too much for anybody, but
Right.
like, the Rachel character admits to doing far more
Oh
heinous
my God.
things.
I'll actually crash out over Rachel's character. Like I swear to God. Because like
She
for
admits to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
horrible, horrible things, but the taboo subject that Zendaya brings up, or Zendaya's character brings up, um, gets such a harsh reaction. And
Right. Right.
I think it's particularly funny. There's a scene later on in the movie where Rachel and uh, Robert
Mike.
Pattinson's character, Mike,
Oh,
yeah,
Charlie. Charlie.
Charlie, yeah, they're talking, and she says this line like, "Oh well, is it America's fault?" And I kind of wanted to be like, "Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes,
Because
actually."
he's from England and he doesn't understand this problem. So
Right.
clearly, right.
And I thought it was a really insightful movie, and I'm really glad that that's
Yeah.
one of the ones that you saw, because I thought that
Yes.
was a really great picture. And if your girlfriend took you to it, I give her a lot of credit. She has good taste.
She seriously has good, I mean, she's just like very intellectual, very deep. Always wants to challenge herself and challenge us and have us talk. She's like she was excited for our debrief over ice cream in the car. So she's great. And honestly, she is very political, but she's not even in the same stratosphere as me. And I do tend to appreciate that a lot because like when I'm with her, I can be unpolitical. Of course, she asks me a million questions. She wants to know what's going on, but a lot of times, like I reserve time for that, and I'm like, that's it for the evening. I just want to be 25. Like I just want
Yeah,
to
I
watch a
get that.
movie, go like grab a beer or something, but yeah, so it was good. And honestly, how I felt was Zendaya's character was overcome with grief and self-reflection, and thought that it was very telling about like society, about how
Yeah.
that was so not even part of the calculation, except for honestly Mike. But again, Mike's problem is self-preservation, which is another thing. You know what I mean? So he wouldn't
Yeah.
say enough. You know what I mean? Like there's even certain like like a racial aspect to that, right? Where like
Yeah.
Mike is the black character, Zendaya is the black character. You know, that there's a bit of commentary there, where to
Yeah.
which I can't really speak on, but to which I understand at a baseline level. And yeah, I mean, I just thought like even like Charlie's character, right? That he is the picture of um self-servingness. And again, that's all I really say. But yeah, it was good. And I also saw probably you shouldn't even say this, but I also saw you see the pizza movie?
No.
It's like, oh my God, it's like the stupidest thing ever. It's like a stoner comedy. It's
I love
like it's
stupid movies, my friend. Please
okay,
recommend.
so I don't even know if I'd recommend it. It's like been all over like I have like a lot of like if you went onto my Instagram like reels like feed, you'd be like Ye's in his 20s. Like it's like all stupid crap, like brain rot stuff. But like they were making fun of the movie because like it's like the guy I've never seen Stranger Things, but it's the curly hair guy, not the skinny one, like
Okay.
the from Gayton something from Stranger Things.
Okay.
And it's basically like it's a stoner comedy about like trying to retrieve pizza while they like are accidentally like high on some like mystery drug. And it's like Harold and Kumar, I guess, if it was like stupid and like brain rot Gen Z humor. I gave it like 2 stars if I'm being honest. Like it wasn't that great, but like as also another film I saw, those are the last two, so I do have to be honest. I won't,
Wait,
because if my
what was the
letterbox
title
is
on that
ever
one?
found, pizza movie, because if
Pizza
my
movie.
letterbox is ever
Okay.
found, yeah, it will be exposed that I do watch some dumb stuff sometimes. So I might as well get ahead of
That's okay. I have a signed
it.
poster from The Room behind me. I don't know if you ever saw that. So, I have a signed poster
That's
from
good.
that crew. So
That's good.
yeah, no,
That's good.
I love me some stupid movies. So I will definitely be
Honestly,
checking that
like
out.
I'm just so serious. Like I'm not a serious person, but so much of my day to day is intrinsically so serious and heavy that honestly for me, like I'll throw on like Family Guy and like just veg out. Like I'll put on It's Always Sunny and just like because there's a bit of
Ah,
social
Sunny.
commentary in that show. Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. But yeah, like I've been watching like I watched Entourage like 3 times over because
Okay.
it's like it's just a dumb show. It's just a
Yeah.
dumb show, and sometimes I need to turn my brain off.
You gotta
So
have
yeah,
something to
no,
decompress at the end of the day.
yeah, exactly. And like, I still watch my, documentaries, and my girlfriend will find me watching some like war documentary at like 2 in the morning. She's like, you should just sleep. Like, I can't, like, I can't. But yeah, like I've been trying to be more intentional with trying to watch more movies, because it's something I used to love to do, and I just don't have a lot of time to do it anymore, unfortunately.
Well, I'm happy that you at least had two to share with us.
Yeah.
Um, they were great picks. Couldn't be more opposite, but great picks.
Oh, literally could not. Yeah.
Listen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and
Thank
talking
you
with
for
me.
having me.
This has been an absolute pleasure. If people need to
But
find you, lucasforcongress.com.
yes, UKASFOR Congress.com.
All right, I will put it in the description for this video as well. And Lucas, I wish you nothing but luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise. Have a good day.
Thank you, you too. If you liked this video and you want to see more, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to keep this machine running, please subscribe to the Patreon page, where you get early access to all these reviews before they hit the channel. All right, I'll see you next week.